The sun hung low over the hills, casting long shadows across a patchwork of farmland below. Talia sat alone in the cockpit of a small, weather-worn single-prop aircraft that groaned softly with each shift in altitude. The paint along the fuselage had dulled from years of sun and wind, its edges chipped and stained with the stories of long flights. The plane hummed with a quiet rhythm, its slow persistence matching the silence of the pilot within. She wore no insignia, no flight school patch. Her green jacket was faded at the cuffs, and her canvas pants bore creases formed by repetition. A frayed headset cupped her ears. Her dark hair was pulled back into a braid that trailed beneath the collar, strands falling loose around a face without cosmetics or ornament. Nothing about her said she belonged to power, rank, or command. That was by design. Beneath the dashboard, she kept a folded paper map tucked into the panel, its edges soft from handling. Her left hand rested gently on the yoke while her right adjusted knobs and dials, not in haste, but with the deliberate calm of someone who had rehearsed each movement 1,000 times. Instruments blinked faintly in amber and green. A small photo, taped crooked to the console, fluttered with every minor bump in air pressure. It showed a child no older than 5, grinning from behind oversized sunglasses. She leaned slightly forward, tracking a penciled mark on the map against the view outside her canopy. The fields below faded into a long stretch of wooded terrain, its river curling like thread beneath the trees. Dusk settled in shades of violet and gold across the sky, catching the silver of the wings in passing flashes. Then the radio gave a soft click, followed by static. Talia reached for the knob and checked the frequency, her fingers brushing the old plastic. She pressed the mic switch and tried again, her voice low and even. "This is Sierra Lima, 9-2 requesting altitude confirmation. Reading sector 28 at..." She stopped. A single red light blinked on the panel. A warning tone chirped once, then fell quiet. The transponder had gone dark. Talia didn't react with alarm. Her eyes narrowed, then scanned the instruments again. She toggled the master switch, tapped a dial with the side of her knuckle. The signal did not return. She reached down and unrolled the edge of the map, realigning her heading manually. The aircraft dipped slightly as she adjusted trim. The world below moved on, oblivious. Miles away, in the heart of a secure radar control room, a screen flashed red. A low blip moved steadily across a segment of restricted airspace. One operator leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "We've got something," he said, his voice flat but alert. "No tag. Not responding." A supervisor joined him. The room filled with the faint hum of elevated attention. Somewhere in the distance, sirens prepared to wake steel. Talia continued flying, unaware. The sky remained quiet, but the world had started to notice. The 2 F-16s appeared from opposite sides of the horizon, slicing the sky with lethal grace. They banked hard as they closed in on the small prop plane, their sharp wings angling toward the sun, their speed reduced only slightly to box her in. Talia didn't flinch. She kept one hand steady on the yoke, the other hovering near the radio switch. Her breath remained slow, controlled. Inside her cockpit, the soft groan of the old engine and the subtle rattle of the frame were the only sounds. Her fingers adjusted a dial, watching the jets fall into formation on either side. "Unidentified aircraft. This is Alpha Echo 6. You are in restricted airspace. You are to descend immediately. Over." The voice came sharp and clipped, full of authority. Talia pressed the button on her mic, speaking evenly. "Alpha Echo 6. This is civilian aircraft Sierra Lima 9-2. I am responding. Descending to comply." There was a pause, followed by a second voice over the channel, more casual but no less cutting. "Well, she talks. I was starting to think this was a drone with a purse." The other pilot chuckled. Is this her first time in the air? Looks like she's flying her grandfather's lawnmower. Talia said nothing. She adjusted altitude, reduced throttle, and began her descent. The sky around her pulsed with jet noise. Her small plane shuddered in their wake. She stayed on course, descending with the same quiet precision she had maintained all along. Back at the airfield, the tower was already alive with chatter. Controllers rerouted regional flights and cleared runways. One of them, a man named Travis, leaned back in his chair and sipped from a paper cup. Looks like we've got a show coming in. They're bringing her down at Gridlock. A second controller laughed. Someone get the cuffs ready. It's Airspace Barbie. A tweet had already begun circulating. A blurry shot from a security feed showed Talia's plane between the fighters. The caption read, "Breaking suspect pilot being escorted by F-16s. Who is she?" By the time Talia touched down on the tarmac of the secure airfield, dozens of personnel had gathered by the observation windows. TSA officers whispered behind their hands. Airfield crew pulled out phones. Someone joked about charging admission. The phrase "national threat" in discount gear had already been posted on a private group chat among agents. The landing itself was flawless. Talia's aircraft dipped and touched down in one smooth movement. Her flaps rose cleanly. The plane rolled to a slow stop. From the tower, someone muttered, "At least she can land." The ground team approached with vehicles. Armed officers jumped out, surrounding the small aircraft. From the tower comms, one of the pilots radioed in with amusement. "She's all yours. Try not to laugh too hard." Inside the cockpit, Talia remained seated, her headset still on, her eyes scanning the dash. The photo of the child fluttered gently against the glass, caught in the breeze from the vent. She turned off the engine, unbuckled her belt, and removed the headset with slow, deliberate care. Over the loudspeaker, a voice barked orders. "Pilot, exit the aircraft, hands visible. Do not reach for anything." Talia complied without hesitation. She pushed open the door and climbed down onto the tarmac, hands held calmly at her sides. She didn't resist when the officers moved in. She said nothing as they patted her down. One of them made a show of lifting her worn flight bag and opening it in front of the crowd. Inside were only notebooks, hand-drawn maps, and a protein bar. "Threat neutralized," one joked, lifting the snack bar and holding it up like evidence. Laughter rippled across the tarmac. Phones captured the moment. A post went up within seconds, pilot caught with trail mix and crayons. More at 11. Talia stood in the center of it all, her hair lifting slightly in the breeze, her expression unreadable. She blinked slowly as they photographed her, whispered about her, pushed her toward the waiting vehicle. Her hands were still raised, her shoulders relaxed. One TSA agent shook his head. "I don't know who let this lady into restricted airspace, but she's about to learn what a holding cell feels like." From inside the tower, the control team leaned closer to the monitors. One of them replayed her landing, watching it from a different angle. Another turned to Travis. "You sure she's not military?" Travis scoffed. "She's barely licensed. Probably thought Google Maps could get her to Kansas." In the cockpit, the photo remained taped to the dash, slightly askew. It trembled once more in the still air as the wind outside rose. No one saw it. No one cared. Talia didn't speak again. She climbed into the back of the vehicle without a glance. The last thing visible was the corner of her jacket caught in the wind before the door closed. The airfield buzzed with mockery, but none of them noticed the silence she left behind. Not yet. The moment Talia stepped out of the aircraft, everything accelerated. The wind carried her hair back as she descended the ladder with silent precision, boots hitting the tarmac one step at a time. The line of armed officers surrounding the plane moved in with guns raised, their shouts coming too fast to distinguish. "Hands up. Step back on your knees now." She didn't argue. She raised her hands slowly, palms open, her face unreadable. One officer sprinted forward and shoved her from the side. She dropped to her knees, her back straight, her gaze steady on the tarmac ahead. A second officer yanked her arms behind her, wrenching her shoulders until the cuffs clamped hard around her wrists. Her skin split slightly beneath the metal, a thin line of blood trickling into her sleeve. Another officer took her headset and flung it toward the aircraft's landing gear, where it bounced and came to rest in the dirt. The onlookers gathered closer. Behind the line of security tape, phones were out. Several agents had already begun streaming live. One of them whispered, "Looks like a mechanic who stole a cockpit," then laughed and panned the camera across her frame. His stream's comment section lit up with heart reactions and laughing emojis. A second agent, younger and more excitable, crouched beside her with a smirk. "YouTube pilot. Huh, let me guess. You Googled your way into restricted airspace." He waved his phone in her face. "Smile for the clip. Grandma." Talia said nothing. Her eyes didn't waver. A trail of dust blew past her legs. Her boots remained planted as if the ground beneath her belonged to her alone. A tech officer in dark glasses and a badge that read Yates stepped forward and lifted her old flight bag from where it had been dropped beside the plane. He unzipped it loudly, tossing items onto the pavement one by one. First came a stack of hand-drawn maps, frayed at the corners. Then, a spiral-bound notebook, its cover split. Then, a logbook, its spine cracked and stained with ink. Last, a folded photo of a child. The picture fluttered to the ground and landed in a muddy patch where an officer's boot stepped on it seconds later. Yates held the logbook up and turned it toward the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with theatrical flair, "the cutting edge of modern aviation. Straight from 1982. Laughter erupted behind him. One woman clapped slowly, muttering, "She's a walking museum." Talia was pulled to her feet. Her arms twisted behind her as she was walked toward a black van. Her jacket had torn along the shoulder where the cuff caught during the takedown. The breeze caught the fabric, flapping it like a flag of surrender. Her head remained high. She didn't resist. Inside the control tower, a live stream was being projected onto the main monitor. A senior agent named Travis leaned on the console, watching. "She's a nobody," he said, sipping coffee. "Maybe a rogue instructor with a death wish." A younger officer named Theo stood nearby, arms folded. He stared at the footage and shook his head. "She's too calm. This isn't panic. This is trained." Travis snorted. "Come on. You think she's some deep-cover asset flying in with torn sleeves and a snack bar?" Theo didn't answer. He watched as the photo of the child, now smeared with mud, was kicked aside by another officer. The image was faint, but enough to register in his mind. Something about the posture, the eyes. It stayed with him. Back on the tarmac, the live streams were still rolling. One camera zoomed in on Talia's cuffs, noting the blood on her wrist. Another followed the logbook as it was tossed into an evidence bag. A caption flashed across a screen. "Suspect detained. Possible smuggling route. More soon." The van door opened. Talia was pushed inside, her head grazing the frame. She ducked without comment and sat against the far wall, her hands still bound. The air inside the vehicle was stale, tinged with sweat and plastic. An agent snapped a photo from the front seat. "This one's going viral," he said. "Tag it Sky Granny." The van drove slowly toward a holding hangar at the far end of the runway. Officers along the road leaned over barricades to catch a glimpse. One saluted mockingly. Another whistled. Inside the vehicle, Talia blinked once and exhaled quietly through her nose. At the hangar, several military observers had gathered. One, a woman in a flight suit with polished boots, stepped forward as the doors opened. She glanced at Talia and turned to the others. "Is this the one they called in?" "Yep," an agent replied. "Had her wrapped up before she could say a word." "Does she even have ID?" "Doesn't match anything. No license, no call sign, nothing we can trace." The observer shrugged. "Then she'll talk soon enough." They left Talia alone in the center of the hangar, seated on a folding chair with zip cuffs now holding her ankles. Her face was streaked with dust. Her hands rested quietly in her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't look away. Behind her, the discarded bag and the bent photo sat on a folding table under fluorescent lights. No one reached for them. No one cared. And still, she said nothing. The hangar was quiet except for the occasional shuffle of boots and the crinkle of plastic evidence bags. Talia sat where they had left her, on a cold metal chair in the center of the room. Her hands remained cuffed in her lap, her ankles bound beneath her, but she showed no discomfort. The light above buzzed faintly. Around her, agents moved without urgency, some half smirking, others bored. One leaned against a table, scrolling through photos on his phone. Another poked through her bag again, lifting the old flight log as if it might suddenly confess something. Travis stood by the folding table, flipping through one of her notebooks with exaggerated flair. He held up a page of sketched air routes and chuckled. This looks like something a bored high schooler made during detention. What is this? A scavenger hunt. The others laughed. Only Theo stayed silent. He watched Talia from a distance, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Her face hadn't changed since she landed. No wince, no fear, no irritation. Just steady quiet. He couldn't stop watching her eyes. They weren't confused or lost. They were measuring. Then the desk phone rang. It wasn't the portable radio or the shared comms line. It was the direct line, the one rarely used except by central clearance. Travis paused, looked over his shoulder, and frowned. He walked to the desk and picked it up. Travis. The voice on the other end wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. His spine straightened slightly. What name did you say? He asked. A pause. The silence stretched. He swallowed. No, sir. I mean, yes. She's here. Another pause, then a stammered, understood. He hung up, stared at the phone, and didn't move. A second line began to ring. This one came from his personal cell. He lifted it with shaking fingers and stepped away from the others, speaking in a lower voice. The agents glanced at each other, confused. Theo didn't move. His eyes were still on Talia. When Travis returned, he didn't say anything. He walked slowly toward her, the sound of his boots echoing in the high ceiling. He reached for the cuffs on her wrists and unlocked them without meeting her eyes. The metal dropped softly into his palm. She didn't thank him. She looked up at him and said, "Leave them on. The Admiral's not here yet." He froze, mouth parting slightly, but no words came out. Talia stood. Her movements were slow, not from pain, but from precision. She stepped away from the chair, the zip cuffs still dangling from her bruised wrists. Her jacket was torn, her hair slightly wind-blown, but there was no vulnerability in her stance. She turned toward the hangar doors and waited. Theo walked to the entrance and pushed them open. Sunlight poured in, lighting the concrete floor like a runway. In the distance, black SUVs approached in a tight convoy. Their engines were deep and smooth, a sound that demanded attention without volume. No one spoke. The other agents stepped back from Talia instinctively, as if something in the air had shifted and they hadn't yet caught up to what it meant. Travis's hands trembled at his sides. The notebook he'd mocked sat closed and forgotten on the table. Talia stood in the path of the light, her silhouette clear against the morning haze. Her cuffs remained, not as a mark of submission, but as a signal. She had waited. Now, the sky would answer. The first SUV didn't slow, it stopped with precision, tires hissing against the concrete as it angled to face the hangar. The door opened before the engine died. A man stepped out wearing a tailored dark suit, his movement fluid and deliberate. He walked with purpose toward the woman in the light, ignoring the rows of agents standing along the walls, ignoring the quiet murmurs behind him. His name was Mason. He carried no visible weapon, no badge, but the weight of authority was in his posture. When he reached Talia, he stopped 2 paces in front of her and raised his hand in a crisp, practiced salute. The entire hangar froze. "Commander Blake," he said clearly, his voice steady and loud enough to carry, "You're cleared. Your assignment was misclassified as a hostile contact. The correction has been made." He called her by a name none of them had known. He addressed her by rank. The ones who had cuffed her only hours ago now looked down at the floor, their confidence cracking. Talia didn't return the salute. She didn't move at all. Mason didn't wait for one. Behind them, another SUV pulled up, its lights still blinking. Out stepped Colonel Adrian, his uniform spotless, silver insignia gleaming on his collar. He surveyed the hangar like it was already beneath him. This incident, he said, barely masking his disgust, was the result of a clerical failure at Fort Dalton's routing center. Commander Blake's aircraft was flagged due to outdated transponder records. She was operating under deep code clearance as part of Operation Halyard. The name meant nothing to most of the agents in the room, but a few recognized it and went pale. She was en route to intercept a target carrying a Level 4 biothreat across the state line. Her avionics were analog by design. No tracking, no comms. The mission required deniability and zero digital signature. He turned toward Travis, who stood stiffly near the evidence table. Instead of intercepting the threat, you intercepted the interceptor. You stopped a mission you didn't understand. There will be consequences. No one spoke. Mason opened a secured folder and handed a thick envelope to Talia. Updated clearance. Commander, the window is still viable if you lift off within the hour. Talia took the envelope without a word. Her hands were still bound. Mason glanced down and gently removed the cuffs himself. There was no ceremony in the gesture. He placed the medal into his coat pocket and stepped back. Behind them, one of the agents fumbled with a tablet. Talia's profile had just been unlocked, authorized under multi-agency seal. As the image loaded, rank codes and security tiers appeared one after another. A murmur rippled down the line of officers. Then, almost hesitantly, one of them raised his hand in salute. Another followed. Within seconds, the entire row of agents stood at attention. Theo, standing near the back, didn't salute. He stood still, hands at his sides, his eyes fixed on Talia. He wasn't shocked anymore. He was ashamed. Travis cleared his throat, taking one tentative step forward. Commander, we had no way of knowing. Mason turned his head. She doesn't need your apology. There was nothing left to say. One of the assistants from earlier entered, holding a clean logbook in both hands. The same book that had been laughed at and tossed aside now bore a fresh plastic cover. The assistant offered it to Talia without speaking. She accepted it and turned it in her hands once. Then, she slipped it into her flight bag, which had also been cleaned and repacked. Adrian addressed the room again. As of this moment, this airfield is classified for the next 24 hours. All camera feeds are locked. Media contact is prohibited. The footage captured earlier of the arrest, the cuffs, the live streams will be sealed. One feed from inside this hangar was leaked. We've already traced the source. He didn't name names. He didn't need to. Talia turned her gaze toward the SUV still idling at the edge of the hangar. I'll fly, she said simply. Mason nodded. Everything's ready. She walked without ceremony toward the hangar doors, her boots quiet on the concrete. No music played. No orders were given. She passed each saluting officer as if they were statues. Her silence was no longer uncertain. It was command. A gust of wind followed her through the open doors. Sunlight reflected off the windshield of her small plane, still parked exactly where she had landed it. The same aircraft they had mocked now seemed almost elegant. The hangar remained still behind her. Even the chatter in the tower had gone silent. Theo looked down at his boots. Then, slowly, he brought his hand to his brow and held the salute as she disappeared into the light. No one else moved, not until the engine of her aircraft started again, soft and steady, like it had always known the sky would clear. It started with a single photo, grainy and off-center, clearly taken in haste. Mason stood at attention, mid-salute, facing a woman with torn sleeves and cuffed wrists. The angle caught just enough of Talia's profile to suggest calm, not defiance. Behind her, agents stood frozen in the sunlight. The image was uploaded by someone inside the hangar and appeared without a caption. It didn't need one. Within hours, it spread across private forums and encrypted chat threads. Then it bled into pilot circles, military subreddits, and defense journalism corners. By morning, 1 million people had seen it. Theories swarmed like hornets. Who was she? Why was she cuffed? Then saluted. Was she CIA foreign military? One caption asked, Did we arrest a ghost pilot? Another read, she didn't flinch. Look at her hands, still cuffed. Someone zoomed in on her torn jacket, circling a faint outline above the left pocket and speculating it was an erased insignia. Another tried to run facial recognition and came back with nothing. A tech blogger wrote, "That plane had no digital footprint, no signal, but it landed cleaner than half the fleet." The call sign appeared next, leaked from a ground crew log by someone who knew what to look for. Whisper. The internet latched onto it instantly. A retired pilot from Nevada posted a rare comment under a photo thread. It was just one sentence. If you flew with Whisper, you know. It was the first confirmation that Talia was real, and more than just a mistake. The junior officer from the hangar, Theo, wrote an anonymous piece titled, "What Silence Looks Like." He didn't name her. He didn't describe her rank. He just told the story of a woman surrounded by weapons, taunted by strangers, who never spoke above a whisper. His final line read, "She didn't resist, because she didn't need to." We weren't mocking a woman. We were humiliating our own ignorance. The post exploded. Former commanders shared it. Female aviators reposted it with their own stories of misjudgment and quiet endurance. Civilian pilots began taping thin black strips to their dashboards, a tribute. No name. Just the shape. Just the silence. Travis was reassigned within the week. The footage that leaked had confirmed his tone, his dismissal, his failure. Karen, the tower supervisor, resigned quietly before the inquiry reached her desk. No public statement was issued. She didn't offer one. Mainstream news caught up, but only after the online world had moved ahead. A national paper ran a headline above a blurry photo, "Unidentified pilot quietly unmakes federal task force." The article cited unnamed defense sources and included quotes from airfield staff who suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen. A podcast titled "The Woman Who Never Spoke" gained traction overnight. Its second episode featured a recorded call with an air traffic controller who had rerouted flights during the interception. His voice cracked when he described watching the prop plane come down between the jets. "She looked like she was delivering mail," he said, "but the jets moved like they were escorting a crown jewel. I knew we were wrong before she touched down." Memes filled the vacuum left by classified silence. One showed a tiny aircraft boxed in by two fighters with the caption, "Oops." Another showed a photoshopped Talia sitting calmly in a chair, while a dozen agents pointed and shouted above her, "She doesn't need your apology." That phrase caught fire. It showed up on bumper stickers, t-shirts, and pilot forums. Some turned it into a quiet code, whisper level, no broadcast, just respect. At a regional airfield in Oregon, a brass plaque appeared beneath the tower steps. It read, "Observed." No explanation, just the word. Inside a high-security briefing room days later, Jenna waited with a sealed envelope in her hand. Her posture was straight, her hair pulled back, her badge marked with a clearance tag 3 levels above anyone else in the building. Talia stepped into the room, without a sound. Jenna handed her the envelope without introduction. "Window closes in 48 hours, Jenna said. Talia nodded once and slipped the envelope into her bag. There was no discussion, no review. Jenna didn't ask about the previous mission. She didn't mention the hangar, the cuffs, the salutes. There were things too big to recount, too precise to summarize. Outside, in the wider world, Talia's name never officially surfaced. She didn't speak to the press. No footage of her flight was ever released. The mission that was intercepted was never named. The biothreat was never confirmed. But something had changed. In a briefing at a separate airbase, a young pilot noticed a small note taped near the radar terminal. It read, "Don't underestimate quiet skies." No one knew who put it there. No one took it down. The idea of Whisper spread like a story passed between campfires too quiet to be shouted, too strong to be ignored. She became a symbol for every unseen woman who had been forced to wait while others decided who she was allowed to be. Not a hero, not a victim. Just proof that the sky still answers to those who don't need to be introduced. And through it all, She never said a word. The sun had just begun to stretch across the fields when Talia stepped onto the tarmac. The rural airstrip was quiet, its only sound the occasional creak of metal or the low moan of wind rolling in from the hills. The same control tower that once laughed behind glass now stood still, its windows dark, its watchers unseen but present. She wore the same faded green jacket, sleeves patched but familiar, her boots pressed softly into the gravel as she walked toward the plane waiting at the edge of the runway. It was the same single-prop aircraft, unchanged since the day it had been mocked for its age and silence. The morning air clung to its wings like memory. One of the ground crew stood by the fueling station, hands in his pockets. He didn't wave, he didn't speak, but when her eyes met his, he gave a small nod, a quiet one, the kind given to someone you no longer misjudge. Talia said nothing in return. She moved with methodical calm, checking the plane in a practiced sequence: wings, flaps, tail. Her fingers ran along the fuselage, confirming what only she needed to know. Inside the cockpit, the photo of the child was no longer taped to the panel. In its place, she pressed a folded note creased sharply and affixed with a single strip of cloth tape. Whatever it said stayed hidden, meant only for the sky. She slid into the seat, strapped in, and reached into the side pocket of her jacket. Her hand emerged holding a black coin. It was smooth and worn, its surface dulled by time. She placed it gently beside the throttle. In the center, one word was engraved in quiet capitals: observed. No one announced her departure. No tower clearance rang through the air. The runway lights did not blink. The world did not pause. But the moment still held weight. She started the engine. It rumbled like an old friend, warm and steady. The plane rolled forward slowly, gaining speed with ease. Dust curled behind the tires as it cut a straight line across the open stretch. With a soft lift of its nose, the aircraft rose into the sky. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't urgent. It was simply right from the ground. No one followed it with a camera. No voice called after it. The crew remained in place, watching as the shape grew smaller, rising through the light mist into clean blue. There were no headlines this time, no broadcasts, no questions. Just the sound of a quiet engine fading into the morning, a woman in the sky, and a note no one would read, taped near a coin that didn't need explaining. She was never loud, never demanding, and never needed recognition to prove her worth. Talia's story reminds us that real strength often moves without noise. In a world that rushes to judge by appearance or title, she stood as proof that clarity, discipline, and quiet confidence can reshape everything. She was misjudged, mocked, and ignored, but she never bent, never explained, and never retaliated. Her power came from knowing who she was long before anyone else did. As you think about her journey, consider where in your own life you've been overlooked. Ask yourself what it means to stay true, even when no one is watching. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in the quiet strength of those who walk through the world unseen but unshaken, follow for more stories that honor them.